Hello my friends, and welcome back to another video and to my kitchen. My name is Amanda, and in today's video we're going to be doing some meal prepping. We're going to do kind of like a breakfast, lunch, and dinner type thing, very fall winter vibes in terms of our food. We're going to be making some satiating tofu scramble breakfast burritos, a corn chowder soup, and some stuffed acorn squash. And I will leave the recipes down below that I'm using to make these dishes, but I really wanted to get back into meal prepping because I really don't feel like cooking every night, especially now that it's getting darker earlier and earlier, and I really just wanted to kind of throw something together so I'd have a few nights off for food and I could eat a more filling breakfast, because I sometimes get sick of eating the same thing over and over again, and I feel like that defeats the purpose of meal prepping. But the fact that this is different than what I have been eating, I think is a great option. And the burritos and the soup is freezer friendly, so you can stock up and have it for whenever you want. So let's get into it. So the very first thing we're gonna do is prepare our veggies for most of the things we're gonna make. So that includes washing, chopping, measuring, just getting everything nice and ready. So once we start cooking, everything will flow nice and smoothly. So we're gonna start by washing our potatoes, celery, and bell peppers. And the reason why we're definitely starting with the potatoes is we're gonna roast those first. So we're gonna set the oven to 425, and these potatoes are for our breakfast burritos. So I'm measuring about 1 to 2 tablespoons of oil and some spices, just garlic powder, onion powder, and salt and pepper, and then a little bit of smoked paprika. And I saw someone do this where they mix their spices with the oil before combining, and they said it coated everything a lot more evenly and better, so I decided to give it a try. And this is really customizable. You can add whatever spices, however much oil, measure with your heart. Just make sure you add salt. And then once those potatoes are nice and seasoned and coated, we're gonna put them on a baking tray, split it up into 2 trays if there is too many potatoes, that way they actually roast and don't steam. And then we're gonna roast these for about 20 minutes and then flip them, mix them after 20 minutes just so they get nice and evenly coated and browned. Next, we're gonna start on our soup. So we're gonna chop our carrots, onions, and celery. We're gonna melt some vegan butter in our Dutch oven and add in our mirepoix, which is a pretty standard mix of vegetables when it comes to making soup. And I will link the recipe that I loosely followed for this below. So now that our veggies are sauteing for our soup, we're going to start on our tofu scramble for our breakfast burritos. So the very first thing to do is crumble up our tofu. You can do this right into the pan, but I find doing it in a bowl it makes it a lot easier. So into our nonstick pan, we're adding a little bit of oil and then cooking our tofu. And you can really cook this as long as you like. So we just wanted to get it started while our soup is going. So now that our veggies are nice and tender, we're gonna add in our garlic and cook that for about a minute until it becomes nice and fragrant. Just keeping an eye on this here so it doesn't burn. The tofu should be fine. You don't really have to worry about it at this point. Then we're gonna add in some spices, salt, and a bay leaf, along with a diced potato. I would recommend using fresh corn if you can, but I only had frozen corn, so that's what I used. And then follow that up with your veggie stock. If you don't have veggie stock, you can use a bouillon cube and some water. If you don't have either one, you can use just plain water, but I would recommend upping the salt. And then add more salt and pepper as needed to flavor. And then we're gonna bring this to a boil and then let it simmer and cook while we focus on our tofu scramble. And the amount of time that you cook your tofu here really depends on how crispy you like it, but I really just wanted to get the edges nice and crisp. So I don't really remember exactly how long I cook it for. I just do it by color, but I will link a recipe for reference down below. And then at this point, as you saw, the 20-minute mark had elapsed, so we flipped our potatoes, and then we are going back to the scramble, making the scrambly sauce for it, which consists of plant milk, tahini, and our tofu scramble spice mix, which I always have some pre-made because it just makes this so much easier. And then once our tofu has kind of gotten browned a little bit, I'm going to add in some red pepper, and I use shallot for this just because I had some that I had to use up. I wanted to add a little bit of veg. This is optional. You could add whatever kind of veggies that you want in here. This is just what I had on hand. And then once that cooks for a few minutes and the vegetables start to soften, we'll add in our scramble sauce, give that a good mix so everything gets nice and coated. And then I like to cook this until the liquid kind of evaporates and then some, because I don't like a mushy tofu scramble. I like a drier scramble. So cook it to how you like it. And at this point, our potatoes are completely done. So we're just gonna take those out and set them aside and lower the heat from 425 to 400. And at this point, our soup is ready also. The potatoes are nice and tender. So we're gonna remove the bay leaf and then add in some plant milk. The recipe calls for cashew cream, but I just couldn't be bothered to make that at this point. So I just used plant milk. And then you could transfer the contents into a blender to blend, or you can use an immersion blender. The recipe calls for blending about half the soup. I kind of just decided to go ham and blend most of it because like the corn just wasn't blending and I didn't like the texture, so I wanted it to be smooth all over. But yeah, so our soup is done, our potatoes are done. We're moving on to the stuffed squash. So I started by preparing the squash, taking the seeds out and making a flax egg, and then crumbling up these field roast sausages, and then just very quickly browning those in a pan just to get a little color on them. They don't have to be all the way cooked because everything is going in the oven. Then remove the sausage, add more butter, and then we're gonna cook down some onions and celery. I also use shallot for this because, again, I had some I had to use up. I'm gonna cook that for 5 to 7 minutes. A bunch of fall spices, garlic, wine, and butter, and maple syrup. This was like a really tasty combination of ingredients. So we are brushing the squash with a mixture of melted vegan butter and maple syrup, and then sprinkling them with salt and pepper. And I wish I would have read the recipe a little bit closer because I totally thought we were baking the squash separately. So I kind of like haphazarded this part of the meal prep, but everything gets baked together. So once the veggies are cooked down, you'll add your spices and garlic and cook that for a little bit, and then deglaze the pan with some dry white wine, and then allow that to cook until the smell of alcohol has dissipated, at least 3 minutes. Added in a little bit more butter and stirred that to combine, just letting some of the liquid cook off. And this is gonna go into our stuffing. I took a shortcut. The blue bag of the Pepperidge Farm is actually plant-based, so that is great. Adding in the sausage to the stuffing mixture along with the flax egg, some dried cranberries, and a little veggie broth, flax egg, and some baking powder. And of course, those veggies that we had sauteed up, giving that a stir to combine. And make sure you use a huge bowl because this makes a lot. And if I'm being honest, I didn't really measure the amount of stuffing. I just used the whole bag, and the recipe makes 8 squash and I only made 4 because it was just me eating these. So I didn't want to like overdo it and end up wasting food. But once the stuffing filling is made, you're just going to add that into the squash and then bake that in the oven. I didn't have tin foil. Make sure you cover it with tin foil so it doesn't burn, and it creates like a steamy environment to help the squash cook. I think that is an issue I ran into when I was making this dish, but it was still really good. We'll talk about that later. So everything is officially cooked now. Now we just have to assemble our breakfast burritos. I didn't really measure. I just kind of scooped it in there and did what I felt was right. So I have some large tortillas. I add in some of the scramble mixture and some of the potatoes. And I honestly thought this was going to be too much potatoes, but because I had so many potatoes, it kind of bulked up the burritos. So I actually was able to make 5 instead of the 4 that I was intending on. So that was great to have an extra burrito because they do freeze well. And then once everything is combined, just roll up your tortilla and make it into a burrito. I like to wet the far corner that I'm rolling into just to kind of allow it to stick a little bit better because I tend to have an issue with them kind of like popping open if I don't wet it. So just kind of adding that extra little step helps like glue it together, kind of like when you make spring rolls, it's already wet and it just sticks. So technique-wise, you want to fold in the sides and then the back and kind of roll and tuck as you go. And then you can wet those 2 little like corners and tuck those a little bit tighter. And then that really makes a nice and secure burrito and really just allows it to be nice and tight so it doesn't spill, which is very great. especially if you're taking this on the go. And then once those burritos are rolled up, I highly recommend giving them a quick toast in an oiled pan. I mean, you could skip this step if you're gonna toast them up when you eat them, but I intend on taking these to work with me, and I won't have access to a pan. I'll just have a microwave, so hopefully it will still cute. They will stay toasty. So we prepped our burritos, and then now we're going to kind of meal prep style our soup, and we're just going to divide this into 4 containers. I didn't really measure. I just did like 1 scoop, 2 scoops, 3 scoops, whatever, how many scoops, to kind of evenly distribute it into each jar or container. And this was really good with a big slice of bread. And also, I totally forgot to make and film, but I wanted to make some crispy chickpea croutons to go along with this soup. So I actually ended up making them the next day when I ate this soup for lunch. And it was really nice to have that little crunchy element to go with it. And it provides a little bit of protein. I will link a video that has some roasted chickpea recipes in it, so then that way you can kind of follow that. I'll link the sage chickpea video that I did for the soup, for my last soup video, but you can do them in the oven. I think I roasted them in the oven at 400 to 425 for like 20 to 30 minutes, just depending on your oven and your crispiness level. And I just seasoned them with garlic powder, onion powder, salt, and pepper. And I think a little bit of sage, just to kind of like going with the fall vibes. But you know what, whatever you want to do, you don't have to do that. You can even do tofu to add on top, or just not. You can enjoy the soup as is with bread. 10 out of 10, still great. But that is kind of where we're at. We have our soup for lunch, our stuffed squash for dinner, and our breakfast burritos. I hope this provided some inspiration for meal prep, so I hope you guys enjoy. All right, my friends, so there you have it. We made a week's worth of delicious breakfast burritos, which are freezer friendly and stay good in the fridge for a few days. That can be reheated in the microwave, the toaster oven, the air fryer, or the oven, or even in a pan, whatever you want to do. And these are super customizable. You could add any sauces or dips or anything in the burrito, but I just find it's a little easier to kind of add that afterwards if you plan on freezing some of them. Great addition would be barbecue sauce or hot sauce or like avocado, anything like that. You can also add in any other vegetables you choose. Soup is great for a quick lunch. All you have to do is reheat it. And I realized that I forgot to film and make. I wanted to make some crispy chickpeas to act as like croutons to go on top of the soup. So I did end up making that, and eating that with the soup throughout the week just adds a little bit of protein, a little bit of crunch. Also delicious with a big toasty slice of sourdough bread, and this can go with pretty much any soup. So I think it's a really good meal prep option, especially this time of year. And then the squash I thought was really good. I did enjoy the recipe, but I would make some adjustments if I made it again. I would cook the squash and the stuffing separately because it did take a really long time to cook, and I think the squash could get more tender if you kind of flip it upside down and allow it to steam. I also didn't have tin foil, so I didn't get that steaming action when I personally cooked them. I would still do the butter and maple glaze. I would just honestly add a lot more butter and pepper and salt to the squash, and then just serve the stuffing in the squash and then broil it to get it crispy on top to serve. So that was my take on these recipes. I also really enjoyed the soup. These are 2 new recipes that I have just tried. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please excuse my dogs in the background. Yeah, that's life. But I hope you guys like this video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up if you found it interesting. Subscribe if you're new, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Bye for now.